Go thou, where two winds are ever by strong necessity blowing, where stroke rings upon stroke, where evil lies upon evil. There all teeming earth doth enclose the prince whom thou seekest. Hello again, and welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, and today we're going to be finishing our rank and review of every single live-action remake or otherwise follow-up to an animated Disney classic.
We're doing a sequel. That's what we do in Hollywood.
Last time we finished at the 11th spot, so today we're going to pick up from there and do 10th through 1st. Without further ado, let's get into it together. Alright, hello again. We're back from our smoke break and our sleep, some of us. And we're back for the top 10, the last day of filming here. Number 10, Alice Through the Looking Glass, 2016. 6 out of 10. This one really surprised me. I had seen it at some point, years ago, much closer to when it came out, but I had no really strong memories, either liking or disliking it terribly much. Going back to it for this ranking, I found myself enjoying it a lot more than I had guessed I might, and I came away from it being quite thoroughly impressed at how seamlessly it carried on from the last Alice film. This time, Alice is even a few years older, having become a ship captain in the interim and going on several adventures for the company that her father started. She finds herself called back to Wonderland, this time to help the Hatter, who is slowly wasting away. Almost all of the original cast is back this time, including Wazakowska, Depp, Bonham Carter, Hathaway, and all the other residents of Wonderland from the first. This movie also delves deep into the Hatter's backstory, as well as that of the two queens. There are two new major characters, the first being Rhys Ifans as the father of the Hatter, which is kind of hilarious when you realize that Ifans is actually 4 years younger than Johnny Depp, the actor playing his son on screen. Ifans, for his part, is good in this role, and the father-son storyline between the two estranged men of the High-Top clan is actually pretty adorable, all told. The other major new character is that of Time himself, played brilliantly by Sacha Baron Cohen. Cohen here takes this role and runs away with it entirely, knowing exactly what kind of movie he's in and giving the perfect performance to fit right into it. His romantic obsession with the Queen of Hearts is hilarious and a wonderful, silly motivation. And the plot revolving around time travel works far better here in a film series as knowingly ridiculous and nonsensical as this one than it does in a lot of other franchises where time travel is often just eventually randomly introduced. Often specifically in the third film in a franchise, interestingly enough. Cue the montage. Here, in a world where basically anything can happen to Alice at any given moment, a plot device such as time travel feels, if anything, like a natural progression. And the fact that time itself then gets to be a character that is considered by most the highlight of the movie just further validates the choice. While far from perfect, this is one of the most impressively solid movies on the list, as while I don't love it anywhere near as much as the original or the first live-action reimagining, I also feel like it's a pretty decent ending to this fairly unique trilogy of films. James Bobbin, of Muppets movies fame, among other things, takes over for Burton and delivers very solid work here as director, and the cast are all again basically just as good as in the previous film, especially Mia Wasikowska as Alice. Nothing incredible on display here, but still a pleasantly silly, fun little watch, bringing up the rear of our top 10 live-action follow-ups.
Pretty good.
Number 9. Lady and the Tramp, 2019. 6.5 out of 10. This is another one that totally shocked me. Despite a few issues, I didn't really dislike anything, and it was altogether quite a pleasant experience watching, with excellent acting from the entire cast of new actors. This was the one film on the entire list that I had never seen even once before making this list, and so I was amazed that it snuck its way into the top 10.
Is it possible this story is true? Yes, it is.
First of all, I felt like the setting was actually quite genius. Setting this remake in New Orleans, as opposed to the original's unnamed New England town, allows the 2019 update to subtly differentiate itself from the first, without feeling too substantially opposed to the feeling of that earlier film.
A similar story happened to a young man in the Pacific Northwest about 20 years ago.
The setting provides not only a wonderfully Princess and the Frog reminiscent soundtrack, but it allows the film to be cast with a lot of natural feeling racial diversity, even within the context of its 1910s setting. The original Lady and the Tramp is a film built largely on carefully and lovingly crafted stereotypes, dramatizing the melting pot of early 20th century America through the broad and exaggerated comedic portrayals of typical New Englanders, Irish Americans, Scottish Americans, Southern Americans, Mexican Americans, Italian Americans, and Siamese cats, to name just a few.
You're right again.
This film opts to put the spotlight much more directly on the mixed European and African American population of New Orleans, so much so that both of the central couples in the film, the humans Jim Deer and Darling, and the dogs Lady and Tramp, are each portrayed by a black woman and a white man. This allows the film to still retain a lot of the original's distinct culture clash theming and appeal, while still adapting that theme in a way that makes sense for live action, as those broader stereotypes of the 1955 version obviously work far better in animation than they ever might when filmed for real. However, yes, half the cast is black in this version, including a hilarious supporting performance from Yvette Nicole Brown as the tiresome and tedious busybody Aunt Sarah.
Let me tell you what I need. I need you to be quiet and in this seat with the seat fully up.
Okay.
That's what I require.
Okay, but I saw him talking.
Did you hear what I require?
She is just as funny as ever here, bringing an overpoweringly officious energy to the role and fully making it her own. I really adore the setting of this movie, and especially how it led to this particular cast being put together, as I really think they all put in phenomenal work in their own rights. Tessa Thompson is an actress that I like in nearly everything I've ever seen her in, and that remains true here, as she gives a lovely, understated, and utterly sympathetic performance as our leading lady, taking over from Barbara Luddy in the original. Her back and forth with Justin Theroux's Tramp is snappy and fun, their banter often just as cute as in the original, but with a little more bite to it, this modern pair's dynamic being a tad more adversarial than their 1955 counterparts. Theroux, for his part, makes for a very good Tramp, his voice portraying the perfect amount of charming, roguish wink for this classically lovable scoundrel. Thomas Mann and Kiersey Clemens are both wonderful as the aforementioned Jim Deer and Darling, perfectly filling their roles as an enormously likable young couple just trying to start their life together with their baby and their dog. There are several other actors doing great work here, but I must give a special mention to Adrian Martinez in the role of Elliot, the dog catcher. This could easily have been a forgettable, thankless, throwaway supporting character, but Martinez's comedic talent elevates it to one of the highlights of the film, and I was smiling and laughing every time he was on screen. Some sequences from the original are omitted and some new scenes added, but the general plot structure remains very much largely intact, and so this ended up feeling like one of the most faithful remakes in terms of the overall story and characterizations. It didn't blow me away entirely, but I ended up thoroughly enjoying this movie. Even if it doesn't quite reach the absolute heights of charm and sweetness that the original did, I would still say that this is very much a worthy and loving remake. Also, I quite liked F. Murray Abraham as the Italian chef guy, or waiter, I should say. He was very good.
Are you sure you can't leave this and come back again?
Oh, and the CG on the dogs was quite impressive, and they also used some real dogs. I can't remember how they did, but the visual effects were very impressive regarding the dogs. It was actually quite impressively well done. One of their best animal features yet in terms of these live-action remakes, so great job.
You got me, friend.
Great job.
Number 8. Beauty and the Beast 2017. 6.5 out of 10. Ooh, now this is a tricky one for me. On the one hand, there is actually a lot that I genuinely like about this movie, to the point where it is, oddly enough, one of the ones I probably rewatch the most often. The funny thing is, even the legitimately bad or cringy parts of this movie are still elements I end up enjoying in a more laughing at rather than with it kind of way, and so I'm probably more fond of this one than I really think it is actually all that good in terms of quality. Let me break it down for you. Let me break it down for you. Let me break it down for you. Some of the soundtrack is really great, especially the new song Nevermore, sung by the Beast. Gaston's song is extremely well done, and overall the music, with one caveat, is a big strength. That one exception is, of course, the singing of Emma Watson. While not awful by any stretch of the imagination, or even bad per se, Watson is nowhere near the singer that Paige O'Hara was in the original, and the comparison does not do her any favors in other aspects either. Beyond Disney going way overboard with pitch correction on Watson's vocals, making her sound overly flat and robotic and robbing her voice of its soul. Once again, Disney, robbing your singers of their voices and their voices' souls. Watson also just never quite feels suited to this role, even though this was at the time an extremely popular fan cast for the character of Belle. Despite everyone being certain that Watson was sure to be one of the highlights of the movie, I and many others actually find her to be one of its central weaknesses, as while she is always a capable actress in any role, she is also undoubtedly a square peg in the round hole that is the role of Belle. Her manner simply doesn't suit it. Belle doesn't really even sound right with an English accent at all, and it doesn't help that the character is not written as strongly here as she was in 1991 either. However, she tries her best, and Watson is far from the worst live action princess on this list, even if she is also far from the best. The rest of the cast, however, is mostly uniformly great. Kevin Kline makes for a splendid update of Maurice, changing him from the pleasantly round, goofy Disney dad trope of the original to a less overtly comedic and more kind, sweet, intelligent old tinkerer. Dan Stevens, despite some weak writing for the Beast as well, is very good, and his performance of Nevermore is a massive high point in the story. It's also not the exclusive fault of either lead, but there is a notable lack of chemistry between Watson and Stevens in a lot of their scenes together, especially when compared to the natural chemistry of some of the romantic couples placed higher up on this list. Josh Gad is quite excellent as a far more morally ambiguous version of LeFou, delivering his song with great skill, and his dynamic with Luke Evans as Gaston might be my personal favorite element. Luke Evans, of course, is marvelous as Gaston. He's much more sympathetic in this version, but I've never minded that one bit, as he still ultimately makes the same kind of selfish choices as the original Gaston did when push came to shove. Making him slightly more polite and level-headed is a more nuanced, but not necessarily worse way to go, as he still ends up caring more about Belle as a potential extension of himself than as an actual life partner with her own fully formed personality and thoughts. He makes a half-hearted attempt to connect to her and talk about books, but you can see that he is really only doing this because nothing else he's tried so far with her has worked. Really, all this definitively tells us is that live-action Gaston has a bit more insight into what actually might ingratiate himself to Belle, making him perhaps a little more clever or observant than his animated original, but not necessarily a better person.
Hey, sweet thing, can I buy you a fish sandwich?
Another big knock on this movie is simply that it is too damn long.
The rent is too damn high.
This is due to the enormous amount of extra material this movie pads its runtime with, including a new introduction explaining the Beast's curse in more depth, Belle inventing a washing machine and teaching a girl to read,
Isn't one enough?
and a magical book that allows them to teleport, among several other small additions and changes here and there. There's some business about a rose. These vary in quality, but what they also collectively do is sort of bloat the runtime far beyond what it probably should be, and give the film a far more sluggish pace than it needed to have. There are also some moments of not great CGI, but there are just as many incredibly impressive shots here too, so I'll mostly call the visuals a wash, with a slight edge to the positive. Overall, while this one has become a bit of a personal silly pleasure in recent years, it also has massive and undeniable flaws, bigger than any of those in the films ranked higher on this list, and so here it must remain.
Oh. All right.
Number 7. Aladdin 2019. 7 out of 10. This film is frustrating to me, as in my opinion it is actually a fairly well done remake in most aspects, that is hampered massively by a very miscast and misdirected villain. Marwan Kenzari is truly lost here, as the highly demanding role of Jafar ends up eating him alive, chewing him up, and spitting him right back out again. It certainly doesn't help that they've cut Jafar's only song, the reprise of Prince Ali, and the voice of his sidekick, as Iago is functionally mute in this version when compared to the Gilbert Gottfried original. This is a big deal, as it means that Kenzari's Jafar is robbed of his most important scene partner from the 1992 version, and thus he is robbed of a great deal of his character's potential charm. He is also, I will reiterate, probably a bit poorly directed here by Guy Ritchie, as the voice he uses is so much less evil, intimidating, and delicious than the work of Jonathan Freeman in the original. This Jafar just ends up coming off as emotionally immature and a bit whiny, the performance of Kenzari never rising to the level of pure entertainment and fun that most of the rest of the movie he is in provides. However, I don't want to badmouth Ritchie here too much, as I'm actually a really big fan of his work as a director overall, and while this isn't one of his strongest films personally, I do think he did a pretty good job here with the material he was provided. Aladdin 2019 is a big, fun, brisk, bold, loud, entertaining, silly, ridiculous, embarrassing ride that is a little overstuffed, but that mostly sticks the landing, even if it still pales in comparison in almost every way to the original. That's the difficulty, however, in being the remake of one of the most widely beloved animated films of all time, as Aladdin 1992 still is. Let's talk about the genie. While there isn't an actor on Earth that could have surpassed or even equaled Robin Williams' performance from the original, I think that Will Smith does just about as well as anybody could be expected to do in terms of filling those shoes. Smith here is enormously charming as the live-action genie, delivering a sweet, tender, and playfully hilarious turn as the lamp-dwelling sidekick of our title character. He brings a different, more laid-back, less in-your-face and gut-bustingly funny energy than Williams did. It works very well for this film, and while his casting was originally criticized to hell and back upon its initial announcement, Will Smith ended up being for me one of the highlights of the movie. Beyond him, the cast is pretty good, with Nasim Pedrad actually delivering my favorite performance in the whole movie as Jasmine's handmaiden Dahlia, her chemistry with Smith a delight each time they share the screen. Mena Massoud is pretty good in the role of Aladdin, with a natural wink to his performance, and he does well to sell his musical numbers especially, and his dancing. Wow. And his romance with Jasmine. For her part, I think Naomi Scott also does very solid work here, and is allowed to keep both her original look and her original accent, which is a subject concerning some of the other live-action princesses that I will get into more in depth later on in the rank in terms of keeping their original dialects, as I hinted on in the introduction. But yes, original accents are a thing I like to keep. While her new song Speechless isn't my favorite in terms of how it fits into the movie, as it completely halts the ending in its tracks for 3 minutes and ruins the pace of the whole climax, she herself is an excellent singer and actress, and all in all, I think she and Masood make their scenes work together perfectly. And the song Speechless is a fine song, I think it's okay, it's just not great in terms of the context.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Number 6. The Jungle Book 2016. 8 out of 10. This is the film that most regularly tops ranking lists of these movies, more so than any other. I can certainly see why, as director Jon Favreau brings an enormous amount of skill and technical savvy to what was an extremely tricky assignment. Unlike his later debacle known as The Lion King 2019 that we have previously discussed, Favreau brought an exceedingly light touch here as director, coaxing charmingly varied performances from his incredibly stacked and talented cast. First off, the 11 to 12-ish at the time Neil Setti was a great choice for Mowgli, Mowgli. It's exceedingly difficult to make a film revolving around a juvenile actor work this well, but Favreau here was able to bring forth from his young lead a positively terrific performance, brimming with charisma, bravery, and youthful joy. His chemistry with the rest of the cast is one of the elements that most strongly makes this film work, and for their parts, the older, more established cast members are all pretty great in their own ways, especially Ben Kingsley as Bagheera. Bill Murray and Christopher Walken are both highlights as Baloo and King Louie, each performing their songs with the requisite aplomb, and Idris Elba provides a positively terrifying version of the timelessly chilling tiger villain Shere Khan. The visuals in this movie are obviously beyond stunning, with Disney able to make a live action remake that is actually about 95% computer animated still somehow work because that crucial last 5% on screen, provided by lead actor Neil Setti, is totally, undeniably real to our eyes in the context of everything. Even though everything around him is fake, because Mowgli himself is real and looks so perfectly real interacting with everything around him, his realness rubs off on all the animated elements, and the magic trick is completed for us in our brains, transforming Jon Favreau's digital vision into a living, breathing reality in front of us. It's a bit like Alice being the realism North Star in the animated Alice in Wonderland, where she looks and moves like a real person because she was sort of very close to rotoscoped onto the real Catherine Beaumont, and then everything around her is oversized and ridiculous. Other than the actors and the visuals, the story for this film is also very solid, with this update raising interesting questions about just how right or wrong Shere Khan actually may be about Mowgli belonging in the jungle or not. It's a nuanced and clever update of an all-time classic original, and while I am not as high on this film as most people, seeing as it did not quite crack my top 5 on this list, I still very much love and enjoy it anytime I go back to rewatch. However, where it falls down for me is that it doesn't quite reach the emotional or dramatic highs of the films that are yet to come on this list, and it also doesn't quite match the charm of the animated original as well as I would have liked it to. It's an excellent film, but I simply think that the original 1967 Jungle Book has become, if anything, quite underrated these days, and so the 2016 version, while a worthy update, does not quite capture that original magic and whimsy, and suffers for that. The original was able to be both unnerving and hilarious, both scary and sweet, with more disturbing, for child audiences, scenes like Kaa's hypnosis, alongside light-hearted fare like the Elephant Brigade. This one also cuts the vultures entirely, and overall, outside of Baloo, this film doesn't really have as much humor or silliness as the original, opting for a more dour, grimdark update that, while successful for the most part, fails to emulate the original's effortlessly smooth fluidity of tone. As well as that, while he does good work here, Bill Murray is no match for the utter vocal genius that was the singing and speaking voice of the legendary Phil Harris.
Nothing like a little afternoon soiree, is there, baby? You know something? This is nectar of the gods.
While I enjoy this movie a great deal, I have to park it here, right at the edge of the top 5, as a mostly wonderful yet ultimately flawed live-action / CGI reimagining.
Like I said, it's very good.
Number 5, Alice in Wonderland 2010, 8.5 out of 10. This movie has one of the best live-action casts overall, with everybody totally killing their parts, including Helena Bonham Carter's first role taking over for the immortal Verna Felton, her second being the fairy godmother in Cinderella, which I'll get to later on. This ended up being way better than I remembered, and I can certainly see why this experimental return to the live-action remake format ended up being the film whose success convinced Disney to fully lean into doing all of the rest of them going forward. It's sometimes forgotten that this movie actually made over $1 billion at the box office, and that's in 2010 dollars. This movie was a legitimate cultural phenomenon for a period of time, especially its aesthetic. We're talking the early days of Tumblr culture here. I remember that some people at the time were actually debating whether this or the original was in fact better, as the original has always been somewhat divisive given the disjointed and episodic nature of its own narrative. I think that since then, respect for the 1951 Alice has actually gone up slightly, while the original praise has cooled a bit towards this one since its 2010 release. For my part, while it doesn't quite equal the 9.5 that I recently gave the original in its Dear, go watch that video, I still really love this one, and it was a wonderful surprise to go back to. Tim Burton and Johnny Depp are both here, right in the middle of their run of collaborations from the 1990s to mid-2010s, and both men do admirable work on this film. Burton's characteristically oddball direction is in full flower here in this CGI-drenched, endlessly visually creative virtual landscape. Burton's visual quirkiness and sense of style was truly unmatched in the late 2000s and early 2010s, and this Alice reimagining is far more interesting for the eyes than I had originally remembered. Johnny Depp, likewise, is phenomenal here as the Mad Hatter, providing a totally different portrayal of the character from Ed Wynn's in 1951, yet still retaining a lot of the ridiculous energy of that previous Hatter. Depp also decided to give his Hatter a subtle lisp, just like Wynn's had, another lovely little nod to the past.
It's you. It's absolutely Alice. You're absolutely Alice. I'd know you anywhere. I'd know him anywhere.
Something seems to be troubling you. Won't you tell us all about it?
The decision to make the Queen of Hearts' head enormous is an inspired choice, giving her a larger-than-life and unhinged, dangerous feeling, almost like a human-sized boil that could pop nastily at any moment.
You have a big cyst here.
The same goes for the decision to give the Knave, played by a pitch-perfectly creepy Crispin Glover, extra long limbs. Speaking of the Queen, Helena Bonham Carter is tremendous in this role. Raging about the screen like a great mad pimple in a crown,
It might want to ooze on us.
Bonham Carter, then married to director Burton, gives a gloriously insane performance here as the Red Queen. Her genuine ferocity contrasted so elegantly with her pathetic stature and behavior. Stephen Fry brings a slightly unnerving warmth to the Cheshire Cat, playing him as a bit less of an overt loose cannon as Sterling Holloway did. And of course, the great Alan Rickman is wonderfully cast as the equally wise and acid-tongued caterpillar Absalom.
Shoot the glass.
And at last, we must talk about the lead. Mia Wasikowska is nothing short of terrific as Alice, taking over for one of my favorite voice performances of all time, the 10-year-old Catherine Beaumont in the 1951 original. Mia plays a just barely grown-up version of the earlier animated child character, and she carries on from Beaumont seamlessly and brilliantly, providing a blasé, unaffected, dispassionate, and comedically level-headed performance that is in all the important ways essentially just like the one that the young Catherine once gave. The fact that Alice is already English as well also helps, meaning that there is no accent change from the original film to this reimagining, as was so common in this era of live-action remakes, and carrying on into the future, as I will talk about in a little moment. Wasikowska is ultimately the perfect choice for this part, and I couldn't imagine any other actress in the role. I only wish she'd gotten to sing a song at some point, like Catherine did several times in the original. I would have loved an updated version of In a World of My Own or something. That would have been cool. One of my favorite elements of this film is the shockingly badass ending. The fight with the Jabberwocky is actually iconic. Alice saying, "Off with your head," before cutting the head off the Christopher Lee-voiced Jabberwock is effing crazy cinema. Roll the clip.
Off with your head!
Lee's delivery of the part of the Jabberwocky is of course a complete treat. There are some truly arresting visuals in this sequence, and Wasikowska murders it with her delivery of her beautifully written 6 Impossible Things monologue.
6. I can slay the Jabberwocky.
What a genuinely all-time great badass heroine moment and sequence. I did not at all remember what a truly incredible fantasy warrior maiden moment this film concludes its climactic fight sequence with.
Wow.
Number 4. Pete's Dragon 2016. 8.5 out of 10. This is one of the sweetest films on the list, featuring an impressively accomplished juvenile central performance from the young Oakes Fegley. This is the only film in the rank that is not in fact a remake or reimagining of any of the official Disney animated classics. It is instead a remake of the 1977 live-action/animation hybrid film of the same name, this time 39 years later swapping out the original's trademark animation for modern photorealistic style CGI. As mentioned, Fegley is excellent here as Pete, and the rest of the cast is also stellar, with Bryce Dallas Howard's performance as Grace anchoring the film, and Wes Bentley, Carl Urban, and Una Lawrence all doing great work. Lastly, Robert Redford is fantastic in his supporting role, taking over for the legendary Mickey Rooney in the original and delivering a performance of aged wit, grace, and unmistakable warmth. The character of Elliot the Dragon is brought to life with stunning aplomb by the visual and sound teams. This film is one of the most impressive of the entire list from a visual standpoint in terms of both its excellence on its own and also being able to actually massively improve on the visual style of the original. I'm not actually that familiar with the original. I've only seen like some scenes of it, and I've maybe seen the whole thing once, but I don't really remember. But from what I remember, this one is way better and way better looking. I will say that. I know what the original looks like, and I like this one's look way better. Elliot truly does feel like a living, breathing, flying part of this world, and his sheer size and scale are communicated perfectly by the film's many brilliantly skillful visual effects artists. David Lowery directed, his first chronologically on this list, after the much later in time and much worse Peter Pan and Wendy that we covered many placements ago now. Lowery does terrific work in charge of this production, bringing a subtle touch to the drama here that harkens back to some of his heavier directorial work, yet always keeping it light enough to still feel like a wholesome and uplifting family feature. Overall, this film makes one of the best cases for these movies to actually exist, as not only does it improve on its predecessor and deliver an excellent movie experience, but it shows that Disney is also willing to occasionally venture outside of the strict animated classics canon itself for past films to remake in this style. An excellent piece of work from all involved. I'm a huge fan of the flying scenes, especially between Pete and Elliot, as they are truly a euphoric joy to behold. A lovely little film, as unexpectedly excellent at the time it came out as it is still appreciated today.
I tell you what though, folks, that's bloody nice. That is really... That is bloody lovely.
Number 3. The Little Mermaid 2023. 8.5 out of 10. I did not expect to love this film as much as I did, and do. Not even close. I ended up seeing this movie at least 3 times in theaters, and enjoyed it more and more each time, and I've watched it at least twice on Disney Plus since then. To start with, for me, Melissa McCarthy gives the best villain performance in any of these live-action remakes, and it's not even particularly close. While I adore Luke Evans' Gaston, as already discussed, he comes in an admirable second best behind the utter brilliance of McCarthy's Ursula. Her singing is stupendous, her comedic timing is impeccable, and overall she does a brilliant job of elevating the film and stealing every scene she's in. Beyond McCarthy, Halle Bailey is a phenomenal choice for this live-action Ariel. While the choice to switch from a white American actress in the original to a black American actress in this remake was a controversial one at first, with many audience members of all backgrounds tiring of the bizarrely specific modern trend of white Disney characters getting consistently swapped to a different ethnicity in their live-action remakes, Halle Bailey was able to put all accusations of casting for the sake of being woke rather than talent to rest with her eventual performance. Bailey totally kills it as Ariel, bringing an incredibly bright and infectious energy to the character, a naturally blooming joy and positivity that is both perfectly fitting for the mermaid princess and utterly endearing. and totally honoring of the original performance from Jodie Benson as well. She absolutely honors her. While most of the princess characters in Disney's live-action remakes have their accents swapped, usually from American in the original animated to English in the remake live-action, Ariel is thankfully allowed to keep her distinctive American way of speaking with the transition from Jodie Benson in the original to Halle Bailey here. None of Belle, Cinderella, or Aurora were quite so lucky, being switched out from the Americans Paige O'Hara, Eileen Woods, and Mary Costa in their originals to the English-sounding Emma Watson, Lily James, and Elle Fanning in their remakes. I say English-sounding, as while Watson and James are both English for real, Elle Fanning is an American actress, much like Mary Costa was before her, but she affects a very good English accent in the role of Aurora, so as to match Angelina Jolie and the rest of her cast. I never hear anybody talking much about this regional change to these characters in their live-action incarnations, but to me, it's actually a lot more jarring to hear a different kind of accent coming out of the mouth of one of these princess characters than it is to simply see a European-American actress switched to an African-American one visually, but still sounding much the same.
Well, the mother says we had to go anyway. We hadn't much a choice in the matter, but sure.
It's a cold journey to school this morning.
Oh, good, you wouldn't belong getting frostbite.
And that's the thing, actually, is that this movie is a perfect one to contrast that difference in race versus accent swapping with, because while Ariel is black in this version but is still American like she was in the original, Prince Eric has been switched to an English actor, Jonah Hauer-King, and while he is still white like he was drawn in the original, now he sounds completely different. And that, again, to me, is actually a much more jarring change to my ears rather than my eyes, because all the original voice actors were able to give us was their voice performances, and so their control over their voice and their acting and their timbre and their idiolect and their singing and their everything, their delivery, their accent, their dialect, their control over their voice and vocal performance was much more important than actually how the character looked, in my opinion. That what the original voice actor was giving us was much more their voice than the color of their skin. And so, I mean, for example, the original voice of Jasmine was a white actress, and nobody really complains about that too much. I mean, maybe you could. So like it goes the other way as well. And so I don't really care about Halle Bailey being cast as Ariel, because I think she did a great job. And again, I would much more it be her and it be an American than it be a white actress who is English but happens to be white. Like, say, if somebody more like Emma Watson had been cast as Ariel instead of Belle. I would much prefer that it was actually an American actress, no matter the color of her skin. But that's just me. I think that the sound matters much more. And I just don't think that the race thing matters too much. Now, in the case of Snow White specifically, I do think that they should have cast an actress who had the very, very, very lightest skin possible, no matter what her ancestry. I think that because the character of Snow White has in the original fairy tale a description of her physically, and that she is meant to literally be as white as snow, that she has to have very, very, very pale skin. Something like maybe the actress Lily Cole, or somebody like that, but somebody with super white skin and then jet black hair, because there is a physical description of Snow White. So that's why I think Rachel Zegler maybe wasn't the best choice for that role visually, because visually it really does matter what she looks like. Whereas with Ariel, it didn't matter quite as much. Maybe with Tinkerbell, it might not matter quite as much. With the genie, it doesn't matter quite as much. But with Snow White specifically, I would say that I think they probably went a bit too far with the race-swapped casting in that one. But that's the nuance of this discussion, right? Like, there is nuance in this discussion. It's not every single part one size fits all. There is, there's wiggle room here. So I hope I articulated that well, and I'm not trying to bully anybody or call out any actors, and I'm not trying to call out Rachel Zegler. I know I bug her sometimes on this channel, but, I do love her as an actress. I hope she's a good Snow White. I just think that she was miscast from the get-go because of that, because she does not fit the physical description of the character at all.
Weird.
I don't care that she's Colombian or whatever, Polish, anything. Like, I don't care about her specific ancestry or background. I just care that her skin is just, I think, too many shades too dark for the physical description of the skin of Snow White in the original fairy tale. So
That's racist.
I wouldn't want a white actress cast as Tiana. Like, that would be ridiculous. I think that would be just as ridiculous. So there you go.
That's racist.
I hope I articulated that all right. I just think that there is nuance to that discussion. So thank you for going with me for a few minutes on that tangent. But To me, what I really care about is getting the accents and the voices right because I am an accent guy.
That's racist.
Getting back to the film itself, let's talk about some of the actual negatives. Easily the worst element of the film overall is the performance of Awkwafina as Scuttle. While the rest of the movie is marvelously well cast for the most part, Awkwafina is occasionally charming, but more often than not exceedingly grating in this part. Not nearly as suited to this comedic blowhard character as Buddy Hackett originally was. On top of her general performance, Awkwafina's Scuttle has the indignity of singing one of the very worst songs ever to appear in a Disney film, the infamous Scuttlebutt. Many before me have pointed out how abjectly terrible this short song from Lin-Manuel Miranda is, and so I shall simply say that if you quite like this film, this is probably the part to skip during your rewatch, and if you don't like this film, then this is the scene to point at while howling in snickering derision, as Awkwafina's singing voice is not all that unlike having broken glass jabbed repeatedly and aggressively into your ear canal over and over and over and over and over.
Now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready?
Ready!
As for the rest of the cast, Jonah Hauer-King is particularly excellent as Prince Eric, although he too falls victim to the sudden and inexplicable change from American-sounding original to English-accented live-action portrayal. Jonah does fantastic vocal work on his new song Wild Uncharted Waters, and Bailey's new song For the First Time is also a great addition to the soundtrack. It's a cool scene too, I like the calypso beat. The songs overall are a highlight of the film, both old and new, and Bailey in particular brings a truly astonishing level of talent, passion, and skill to her sung performance in all of Ariel's numbers. The chemistry between Bailey and Hauer-King is also particularly good, easily one of the better and more natural central romances in any of these updated stories. There are other small changes I don't love, and the movie is a little bit overlong in the middle, but overall, The Little Mermaid 2023 is a faithful and enormously respectful remake of the 1989 film, a live-action reimagining that is just as in love with the original animation as we are, and was determined to do it justice in every way that it could. Also, I think Jodie Benson's cameo is very cute.
That's a 10.
Number 2. Christopher Robin, 2018. 9 out of 10. Not only did I greatly enjoy Christopher Robin when it came out, but it has also grown on me even more so over the years, to the point where I now return to it regularly as a cherished favorite. This is also the best sequel of these reimaginings, beating out my number 5 pick, Alice in Wonderland 2010, by half a point, coming in at a 9 out of 10. Mark Forster was an inspired choice to direct, he being a director who is enormously adept at telling stories that have to do with their main characters being caught in the middle of their more mundane everyday life, and a more fantastical and magical existence dependent on creativity and imagination.
Are you the king of anything?
Like what?
Anything. King of the lanes at the local bowling alley.
King of the Lanes?
King of the lanes, king of the trolls.
King of the Trolls?
Ewan McGregor's adult Christopher does indeed remind me in many ways of both Johnny Depp's J.M. Barrie in 2004's Finding Neverland, with his warmth, charm, and gleeful nature in the second half.
I'm not lying to you. I don't know what's wrong.
But also of Will Ferrell's Harold Crick from 2006's Stranger Than Fiction, what with his irritability, sentimentality, and utter sincerity.
I brought you flowers.
Forster brings the story of Christopher's rediscovery of the 100-acre wood to life with just as much care and skill as he did for those two earlier characters, and for his part, McGregor is simply stunning in the title role. Ewan makes a perfect grown-up Christopher, and his central performance opposite the familiar voice of Jim Cummings as Winnie the Pooh ties the movie together beautifully. Speaking of Cummings, he is resplendent in this turn as Pooh, a character that he has now voiced flawlessly for decades.
Flawless.
His chemistry with McGregor is excellent, and his dynamic with the rest of the animals is exactly as it should be. The rest of the actors voicing the animals all do lovely work, especially Brad Garrett in his turn as Eeyore. Haley Atwell, in her second appearance in one of these reimaginings, is utterly wonderful as Peter's wife Evelyn, and their bond is a huge part of the film. As mentioned earlier, similar to Alice in Wonderland 2016, this film is a sequel to the two Winnie the Pooh themed Disney animated classics from 1977 and 2011, rather than a remake of either of them. This works tremendously well, allowing Christopher Robin to stand out on its own merits, and feel like a distinct and unique project all on its own. This is a story about rediscovering youthful innocence and imagination, about family, about the struggle to remain a child at heart, and most of all, it is a story about what is truly important in life.
Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
Not getting ahead, succeeding, and making a name for ourselves at any cost, but rather taking care of and spending time with the ones we love. This is a truly beautiful film in every sense of the word. Beautiful in its visuals, its music, its performances, its writing, and most of all, beautiful in its message. This is about as lovely and earnest a film as it is possible to make, an enduring and enrapturing ode to childlike wonder and joy. And also the CG and the visual effects on the stuffed animals coming to life is incredibly impressive. The visual effects in this movie are really, really, really good. It's just a great looking movie overall.
Oh man, now that looks good.
Here we go. Wow, drum roll please for the movie that you all know is coming because it's the only one I haven't talked about yet. Number 1, Cinderella 2015, 9.5 out of 10. At last, here we are with the film that once upon a time gave everyone a great deal of early hope that these live-action remakes might sometimes be so great as to actively improve on their original animated counterparts. Cinderella 2015 is still, almost a decade later now, the nearly flawless, gleaming, glistening, crowning jewel at the center of the misshapen copycat tiara that is the Disney animation live-action remakes canon. Coming hot on the heels of the commercial success of the inferior but still well-liked at the time Maleficent, Cinderella 2015 was the movie that got many, many moviegoers on board with the idea of remaking most of the Disney animated classics in live action. That is just how well-liked and received this film was at the time. It wasn't the first. That distinction is shared on a technicality between The Jungle Book 1994 and 101 Dalmatians, and it wasn't the billion-dollar smash hit that 2010's Alice in Wonderland live-action sequel was, but Cinderella 2015 is the remake that truly gave general audiences hope for the future of this concept that Disney had by that point set out to release at least one film in the vein of every single year.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
Till basically you or I or any of us are dead. This hope and faith that was present in 2015 has largely been squandered, especially in the latter half of that 9 years since, but Cinderella 2015 still stands tall as the one Disney live-action follow-up that basically everybody can agree not only goes toe-to-toe with its original source material, but arguably improves upon it. This is especially interesting considering that Cinderella 3, A Twist in Time, also happens to be my pick for the best Disney animation direct-to-video sequel of all time.
I forbid you to take another step down these stairs! Okay.
The Disney Cinderella franchise, bizarrely well done in the oddest ways. However, in my view, this film, live-action Cinderella 2015, is actually their greatest use of this character and version of this tale. What makes it so great? Let us begin with Lily James. Here is an actress that truly understands the heart of her character. While I dislike the switching of accents for most of these characters that have had that done, I don't mind her British here in place of Wood's original transatlantic American, and her performance all around is simply astonishingly winning. James brings an effortless, easy kindness to this role, breathing into her Cinderella such a warmth of spirit and unrelentingly giving nature that she is virtually impossible to dislike. She truly lives up to and honors Eileen Wood's performance from 1950. I have the itchiest nose right now. Her chemistry with Richard Madden's Prince Kit is wonderful, and speaking of him, the prince here is fantastic. Madden kills it in his performance, and the writing of the character is done with infinitely more depth than in the original, and even more so still than in the animated sequel. This is, without a doubt, the most complex and layered version of Prince Charming that Disney has ever given us or Cinderella. While not as timelessly brilliant as Eleanor Audley in 1950, Cate Blanchett does memorable work as live-action Lady Tremaine, and shares several great scenes with Lily James. Derek Jacobi is brilliantly sweet as the king, and Helena Bonham Carter is simply marvelous as the fairy godmother, the second of two roles she took on in these live-action follow-ups, after playing the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland. Oddly enough, both of these roles were originated by the legendary Verna Felton, back-to-back in 1950 and 1951. Although, of course, Yvette Nicole Brown takes over for Aunt Sarah in Lady and the Tramp, and I guess Imelda Staunton takes over for Flora, although it's not even Flora in Maleficent, it's a completely different fairy with an English accent, and anyway. Verna Felton has had her parts redone many, many times. Ben Chaplin gives an especially charming, achingly vulnerable performance as Ella's father, and Hayley Atwell is wonderful in her small role as Ella's mother, her first as well of two roles in these live actions, before Evelyn in Christopher Robin. Yes, she's really, really great in Christopher Robin, and her one scene in this is not her one scene, but her few scenes in this are gorgeous. So Hayley Atwell gets to be in our number 1 and 2 on this list, so go Hayley Atwell. Beyond the remarkable cast, this film is, like the great lady once said, practically perfect in every way.
Practically perfect in every way.
Kenneth Branagh directed, and he is a man known for his particular skill in adapting both popular classic and modern fiction, having made films based on the works of authors as diverse as William Shakespeare, Agatha Christie, Tom Clancy, and Jack Kirby. This time, he's adapting a classic fairy tale, specifically Charles Perrault's version, as Disney always draws inspiration from, and he does so beautifully. Branagh understands the sincerity needed to tell this story, and that to adapt the 1950 original to the live-action format, significant changes would have to be made. The decisions to reduce the parts of the mice and beef up the role of the prince are all totally inspired, and work perfectly together to weave an excellently paced, effortlessly dreamlike vision of a classic fairy tale. Another thing I adore about this film is its central message, stated by Ella's mother on her deathbed. That message being, have courage and be kind.
I know you. You know you. And I know you know that I know you.
This elegant, simple, and yet infinitely wise sentiment is the central point of Ella's entire character. Her astonishing ability to show kindness even to those who have shown her nothing but cruelty, combined with her enormous capacity to face her fears and remain unfailingly brave. James' final scene opposite Blanchett's Tremaine is quietly powerful, showing the composure and grace of Ella winning out in the face of even the most difficult situations and opposition. Just like the original, of course, this movie is an incredible portrayal of what subtle domestic abuse can look like, and those scenes are very powerful, the way that Blanchett and especially Lily James perform them. It is great.
Why do you do it? Why? Why? Because you are young and innocent and good, and I...
The music is beautiful, the cinematography lovely, the costumes stunning, the lead absolutely perfect, and altogether, every element of this movie combines to make it the best Cinderella film that Disney has ever produced, and their greatest live-action reimagining of any animated classic ever. And that is the ranking list. That is the rank of the 21. I cut out the Sorcerer's Apprentice because I don't consider that a remake. It's one section of Fantasia, and I've never actually seen Sorcerer's Apprentice live action, so whatever, I cut that out anyway. That is the 21 live action remakes slash reimaginings slash sequels slash what have yous.
What have you?
That Disney has done of their animated classics. All ranked and rated for you and reviewed basically over the last almost 3 hours, I'm sure. And yeah, that's the whole kit and caboodle. So let's just read through all of it once more so we can hear the whole list back to back or back to front, and I can then go over some of my bests, maybe bests and worsts, before I sign off on the whole video here. Number 21, Pinocchio 2022, 1 out of 10. Number 20, The Lion King 2019, 2 out of 10. Number 19, 102 Dalmatians 2000, 2.5 out of 10. Number 18, Mulan 2020, 2.5 out of 10. Number 17, Peter Pan and Wendy 2023, 3 out of 10. Number 16, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil 2019, 3.5 out of 10. Number 15, Maleficent 2014, 4.5 out of 10. Number 14, Cruella 2021, 5 out of 10. Number 13, 101 Dalmatians 1996, 5.5 out of 10. Number 12, Dumbo 2019, 5.5 out of 10. Number 11, The Jungle Book 1994, 5.5 out of 10. Number 10, Alice Through the Looking Glass 2016, 6 out of 10. Number 9, Lady and the Tramp 2019, 6.5 out of 10. Number 8, Beauty and the Beast 2017, 6.5 out of 10. Number 7, Aladdin 2019, God, there's a lot of 2019s in here, 7 out of 10. Number 6, The Jungle Book 2016, 8 out of 10. Number 5, Alice in Wonderland 2010, 8.5 out of 10. Number 4, Pete's Dragon 2016, 8.5 out of 10. Number 3, The Little Mermaid 2023, 8.5 out of 10. Number 2, Christopher Robin 2018, 9 out of 10. And finally, number 1, Cinderella 2015, 9.5 out of 10. So now that that's the whole list and you can see it up there in front of you, it took me a couple of weeks to watch and a week to write this. It was very fun though. I really enjoy these ranks and reviews, and hopefully you guys enjoy watching them. They certainly seem to do well views-wise, but now I'm at the end. I would like to just take a few minutes to give sort of best and worst awards for different categories to a few of the films. The best villain and hero and whatnot.
Peggy, I can see your whatnots.
Worst on the list. Before I sign off, I would say that the best lead character of these remakes probably does go to Cinderella. One note I would say that the reason I take off a half point for Cinderella 2015 and don't give it a 10 out of 10 is that they did cut out the songs, and I do love the songs like So This Is Love and A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes and Sing Sweet Nightingale. Like, I like the song that they have in the movie, and Lily James did get to sing, which is why I don't take like a whole point off, but I do wish she'd gotten those Eileen Woods songs to sing in 2015 that she got in 1950. I think that would have been great. But in terms of the acting and the performance for best lead, I think it would probably be Lily James or maybe Ewan McGregor, but those two are kind of in a tie at the top for me. Worst lead performance I think has to go to Liu Yifei. Like I said before, again, I don't love picking worsts, but in that case it's kind of easy for me, so I'm just gonna say that. And same goes for best and worst princess, I guess. Best villain, definitely, as I said before, goes to Melissa McCarthy for Ursula in 2023. She is a phenomenal villain, and there's a couple that come very, very close, like Gaston, like Shere Khan. They're very, very good. But yeah, she just is, she is chilling. Whew. She's so funny, and yet she's so menacing. She's just, Melissa McCarthy is honestly so talented and has so much more range than people give her credit for. She is really, really good sometimes. Like, just phenomenally talented. So great. And so beautiful. I have such a crush on Melissa McCarthy. Anyway, moving on. Worst villain, I think, well, he might not be the absolute worst villain on the list, but I think that I'd give the worst villain in terms of relation to the rest of his movie overall. I'd have to give that to Marwan Kenzari's Jafar. Again, I hate to bag on the guy, but he wasn't good in that role. He was miscast. They did Jafar dirty in a number of ways. They took a scene partner away. They took a song away. They just basically made him this self-serious buffoon who's obsessed with not being number 2, who's obsessed with not being second.
I'm number 1. You're number 2.
He's just not intimidating or funny or charming or anything anymore. So I think that worst villain, just compared to the rest of his movie especially, and just how much he drags the movie down, is Jafar. which is very interesting to sort of compare the performances of McCarthy to Kenzari and just how much more successful one is than the other. Best idea for a remake? Probably either Cinderella or Pete's Dragon, in terms of like how good of an idea it was to actually remake that movie. And then the worst idea would probably be Lion King, or maybe Mulan, maybe Pinocchio. Yeah, those were just bad ideas from the get-go, just because of how great the originals are and how beloved they are, and how difficult it is to redo those. Maleficent as well, just because of what an ill-advised idea the way they took that character story is, I think. So those were the worst ideas. Anything else I want to say? This was fun. This was a fun one to make. I enjoyed this one, even though it's going to be a whale of a time to edit, and so I'm just giving myself more and more. I'm just vamping here. Lady and the Tramp is going to be next, so, you know, tune in for that next week. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to say. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, this big old journey through these live action remakes. Actually, live action remakes. Through this long 3-hour-ish romp through the Disney live-action remakes canon. The 21 that have been released so far, and Mufasa: The Lion King is coming out later this year, but maybe I'll do a full review of that, or maybe I'll just add it onto this video, do a little addendum, do a little like 5-minute review of it like these ones are. Yeah, we'll see what I feel like doing for that one, but that'll be, I think, number 22 in this canon, unless we are counting the Sorcerer's Apprentice, which I'm not. But other than that, yeah, I'll keep talking about these as they come. I'm sure I'll talk about Snow White when it comes out. I might even do a full deer on the live-action Snow White remake, just because it has been so near and dear to my heart on this channel. And I poke fun at it so often.
And very evidently so.
Lovingly, I try to, but still, it is just funny to me. So anyway, thank you so very much for joining me and for watching. And if you're still here, good night, good luck, and
it's over. Go home.
That's all.